So this skirt uses our final type of pleat that we're going to draft, and it's called a box pleat. So the main difference with the box pleat is instead of folding in one direction, it actually folds in two directions into the center, creating that box. So if we pull it out, okay, you can see that we've got a fold line here and here. So the placement line is actually centrally through this underlayer here. Okay, the other thing about the box pleat to note is that it has actually a separate piece for that panel that sits close to the body. So that's actually called the pleat underlay. Okay, so the box pleat, again, you can see probably sits quite straight like the kick pleat. And the underlay actually gets drafted all the way from the hem up to the waistline, so that area underneath there, those bits that fold back, actually sit. So we don't cut it away like we do with the kick pleat and the inverted pleat. Okay, so that's the box pleat. So with the box pleat, we begin the draft in the same way we did with the inverted pleat, by drafting a rectangle 19 centimeters by 28, and then drafting in a construction line and distributing the dart of the same proportions, 8 centimeters by 1.5, over that construction line. So remember again, where that construction line is placed is a variable, but if you want to keep it the same as the other two types of pleat, it was 8 centimeters in from the center. Okay, so once you've drafted that, or you could just use the one from your inverted pleat style, okay, take a copy like you did last time, and then we will do the other drafting at the intermediate stage. Okay, so now that I've cut out my pieces, again, I'm going to split it, okay, either side, and tape them. Try and keep the hemline in line. You want to leave quite a bit of space in between, because we're going to draft pleat underlay here and here, okay? Okay, so now that our pieces are stuck in place, we're going to begin first by drafting the spring onto each panel. So again, it's the 1 centimeter at the bottom there. Okay, so marking out that point, continuing the seam line, the hemline, sorry. Okay, and taking it back up. Now this time we're going to go all the way up to that the notch where our dart was, okay, that balance mark. Oh. Texture seems to have gone a bit dry. Okay, and repeat for the other side. Okay, and bring you up to that balance mark again, so they're equal at the moment. Okay, so we're going to work on this side first, and then we will repeat all the proportions for the other side. So first of all, at your waistline, okay, so following the angle of that dart line or the seam line, okay, we're going to square out. Okay, now go bigger than you need at the moment, okay, so we're just creating the squares. We're not actually creating any measurements as of yet. Okay, now at that notch point or that balance mark, we also want to square out, and I'm angling along the spring line like we did with our kick pleat. Okay, now flip your ruler and we want to do the same thing at the hemline. Okay, again along that spring line, and we're just squaring out. Now you might have to judge. I'm going to talk through the proportions that I'm doing on my piece at the moment. However, you might need to judge those proportions a little bit yourself. Okay, the idea is that you get a sort of semi-smooth line sort of going down here. Okay, so at the top I'm going to mark along that squared line 3 centimeters. Okay, because remember that this is forming the pleat underlay. Okay, and at the hemline I'm going to measure out 5, and I'm actually just going to draw a straight line between the two. Okay, oh sorry, along this line here, okay, I'm going to measure out 3.5. Okay, so join all of the points together. So I've got 3, 3.5, and now finally 5 centimeters. That's past that spring line. Okay, now I'm going to repeat the same process for the other side. Okay, so again I'm squaring along the seam line. Okay, then following the spring line at that notch. Okay, flipping my ruler, and at the hemline. And I'm going to mark 3 centimeters, 3.5, and 5 centimeters at the hem. And then joining all those points together. Now, from here to here is a seam line. Now, as you remember from the skirt on the stand, this line and this line, our spring lines, are both fold lines. So that's the main difference between this. So these lines here both become PFL, pleat fold line. Okay, so again, these points here, okay, are going to be our tailor's tacks, or where we finish our seam. So that completes the 2 main outer pieces. Now we're going to move on to what's called the pleat underlay. So to draft the pleat underlay, what we need to do is we're just going to label these essentially these square lines, okay, with letters so that you know which line we're talking about. Okay, so this one is A, this one is B, and our hemline is C. Okay, so basically from A to B we have a length, and from B to C, so I'm going along essentially the spring line and the seam line. Okay, so we've got, you would have 8 centimeters at this point. I'm not quite sure what that measurement is from that point to your hem on your scale. Okay, so essentially what you need to do is first make sort of like a, I guess like a letter I, okay, and then with a further cross. I'll explain that more in detail. So if we move over here now, we're going to draft the underlay. So we begin by drafting first a central line and then a square at the top. Okay, so you can see I'm going quite wide on this side of my ruler, okay, because it's much better to square exactly what you need. Okay, then I'm going to square in the opposite direction at the top as well. Now, measuring down from this point, so essentially this line is now the A line, okay? So then I'm going to measure down from the A line the distance to B. So in your case, that's going to be 8 centimetres. Again, I'm squaring off that central line. It's very, very important to be accurate. Okay, and I'm going to flip my ruler in the opposite direction. Okay, so this one now becomes B. Okay, and then measuring down from B the distance to that C along your spring line. Okay, so you'll have to record that measurement yourself because I'm just not sure what it would be in the A4 scale. So you'll just have to measure that bit. So you're measuring on the panel from this point to this point here. Okay, so taking that measurement, measure down and square out. And again, transfer to the other side. So you'll notice that this is quite familiar because obviously this is a little bit like the 8, 10, 12 Gore block. Okay, it's very similar. We're using the proportions that we've drafted, okay, and it's by direct measurement, squaring out on either side. Okay, so we've got C. Now at A, okay, we measure out the pleat depth. So if you remember, mine here was 3 centimetres. So I want to measure out either side of the centre line 3 centimetres and also on this side, okay, because that's going to be for the other side of the joining panel. Okay, on my B line, okay, I had 3.5. So I'm going to measure that out in both directions. And then going to the C line, I'm going to measure out 5 centimetres in each direction. And then you simply join them all together. So our centre line now becomes the pleat placement line, or PPL, okay, and also the grain line of that piece. So when we cut this one out, we put balance marks at this point also. Okay, so that now completes all the pattern pieces, and we're ready to trace off our final patterns to make our paper tacker.